It was a week of big breaking news on multiple true crime fronts, and there was a seismic detonation across South Carolina's political landscape. In this episode, I'm going to sit down with Valerie Borline of the Wall Street Journal to talk you through several of the true crime cases we've been following. I'm also going to be joined by our research director, Jen Wood, to listen to some seismic recordings related to the Micah Miller saga. Last but not least, Dylan Nolan and I are going to sit down and unpack what was an absolutely unprecedented week in South Carolina politics. We broke a ton of news on FITSNews this week in the Palmetto political realm. We're going to take you through all the big developments. I'm Will Folks, the founding editor of FITSNews. Thanks for checking in on our week in review. Let's get to it. So if you've been following our media outlet for the last few weeks, you know the Murdoch murders, crime, and corruption saga is back with a vengeance. This is a story, again, which gripped the country, which gripped international audiences. Back in 2023, a high-profile double homicide trial. Well, the story of Alex Murdaugh continues as his appeal ramps up and as an investigation into allegations of jury tampering during that hugely publicized trial continues to move forward. We figured who better to discuss these latest developments than the reporter who wrote the definitive volume on the Murdoch murders, crime, and corruption saga, Valerie Borline, reporter with the Wall Street Journal, former reporter, political governance reporter here in South Carolina. Valerie's experience goes back decades, and we are more than thrilled to have her in the studio this week. Here's a cut from that interview. I know you've been following the news over the last few weeks. There have been developments related to not only Alex Murdaugh's appeal, but Becky Hill, the clerk of court.
So many developments.
Right, her arrest very recently. I want to ask you, and I've spoken with a bunch of folks about this in the last few weeks, but your perspective, I really want to get. Where are you on Alex Murdaugh's chances for a new trial? Do you think this is a done deal at this point? Do you think it's still an uphill climb? Do you think the guy gets a new trial, and why or why not?
Well, you know, I listened to your interview with Dick Harpootlian recently, and he was very bullish on the odds. But, you know, spoiler, Dick is very bullish on, you know, what he thinks is going to happen as long as it favors what he wants to happen. But no, I tend to agree that the odds of a new trial on the homicides is so much higher than a year ago, or even in the wake of the evidentiary hearing in January 2024, when Becky Hill was on the stand and talking about the jury tampering allegations. So I think part of that is just we know a lot more than we knew then about Becky's credibility, unfortunately. And then we also, I say unfortunately because she was a person that I came to really
Both
like.
of us.
And, you know,
all of us.
Everybody. I remember, I think it was Dick Harpootlian who stood up and said, you know, point of personal privilege, I just want to praise Becky, who's the best clerk of court in the state. And Creighton's popped up that day, and I want to praise Becky. And, you know,
the AG called her Becky Boo.
She was the principal of the little elementary school that we were living in for 6 weeks, and she ran a good courtroom, and we relied on her. The jury relied on her. So that's why I say, unfortunately, we found out things about her credibility when these warrants came out a couple weeks ago. I think that, but then also the change in the Supreme Court. Mm-hmm. That is a significant change in terms of potential favorability to Alex Murdaugh's argument that he deserves a new trial. I think also the retirement of Judge Newman, who was so well-liked and such a lion of the judicial community in the state. So I don't know, but I think on the state level, I'm not sure. On the federal level, his chances of getting a new trial on the homicide are fairly high in my view.
And that's based on just the interpretation of those federal statutes for tampering.
For tampering, I mean, because we had such but we had a similar case involving Russell Laffitte, the banker who was convicted on very significant federal charges, mm-hmm. and his conviction was overturned because of problematic interactions between the judge and the jury, according to the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. I think that caught me by surprise, I guess I should say. Sure. And the standards that they applied make it more likely that Alex might get a new trial. We're several years from it, I believe. We are. But I always like to say in the epilogue of the book, that's that hearing in Beaufort in November of 2023. So, 7-8 months after his conviction on the double homicides. We were all in Beaufort. And you remember, it was such a different vibe. I write about it, like I said, in the epilogue. Alex comes in an orange jumpsuit. He's shackled hand and feet. He looks around the courtroom Buster's not there. John Marvin's not there. His sister's not there. He's very much alone. And the bailiffs are not making eye contact with him. And he proceeded to plead guilty to all the predicate crimes, right? The motive. So what that did was ensure that he will be in prison, in state prison, for the rest of his natural life. So we do have a first ending, regardless of how many different iterations of the Alec Murdaugh story we see in the coming years. We do have a first ending, and he will never be free of state custody, in my view.
Yeah, and nor should he. I mean, I think all the folks that sort of conflate this as, well, you want a new trial, you must think Alec Murdaugh is not guilty. No. That's certainly not where I'm coming from. I think he deserves a new trial because his Sixth Amendment rights were violated.
Well,
I still think
you were pretty clear about that. You and Jen Wood both on your views about that, whether his rights to a fair trial were violated. But you remember, I mean, that jury, 6 or 8 of them knew each other by first name before they walked to the bag.
They did.
And Becky knew a lot of them.
Very closely.
Very closely. And so, yeah, I don't know where we end up, but it's more likely today than it was a year ago, for sure.
Now, it's obviously not just Murdoch news that Valerie's been following. In fact, she's on the trail of a big story in Ory County, South Carolina. We've covered it a little bit here at FITSNews, but Val, once again, has been leading the charge on the story of Scott Spivey. Here's an excerpt from my conversation with Valerie about that still unraveling case. Well, let's talk about another case that you're very focused on here in South Carolina. In fact, the reason you're in South Carolina right now is this case out of Ory County, South Carolina.
Ory County, yeah.
The Scott Spivey shooting. This happened back in the fall of 2023. It was an aggressive pursuit, truck pursuit, not law enforcement. These are private citizens here. But Spivey, an insurance adjuster from North Carolina, is that correct? Have I got that right?
Yeah.
And then a restaurant owner, Weldon Boyd, chasing him in this truck with one of his friends. It ends in a hail of gunfire, a botched police investigation. You wrote the definitive story on this, Val, a 2-part series, front page of the Wall Street Journal. Give us this tale. What's alluring about this story? What's drawing you to this story?
Well, you know, I thought I had a pretty good handle on the capacity for corruption and I guess I'll just say it, official misdeeds, given what is in the devil at his elbow. Given, I'm thinking in particular about the DNR investigation of Mallory Beach, and I think it's chapter 13. There is a lengthy chapter in my book where I try to document 11 or 12 missing pieces of evidence that just went away. I mean, how can you? There are pictures of you taking DNA swabs. How did they disappear? You say in here that you recorded this interview. Where's the recording? I thought I had understood that corruption, even with as much checks and balances that we're supposed to have, I thought I understood that it existed. That what we're seeing in the Scott Spivey case is on another level, on an institutional level, in my view, happening in the police department.
Walk us through some of the allegations.
So you know, I think one of the things to understand is that part of South Carolina, that Ory County line, it has moved. Like Camp Swamp Road, where Scott Spivey was killed, has been in South Carolina at times. It's been in North Carolina at times. It's a very porous area. There's Tabor City, which is North Carolina, and then Loris are called the Twin Cities. So you live in Tabor City, but you shop at the Food Lion in downtown Loris, or you live in Loris.
Like 3 or 4 miles.
Oh, yes, you don't even know when you're crossing the state line, except the gas prices are a little different. That was my barometer. And I grew up 1 county north of Columbus County in North Carolina. So like, I know that area. Like Myrtle Beach was where we went to the mall. We went to the big town. So at any rate, what happened was Scott Spivey was coming home. It was a Saturday in the fall, watching Clemson football at a place called Boardwalk Billy's bar in North Myrtle Beach. He'd had some beers, he'd had a fireball shot or two, and a cheeseburger, and got in the car after 5 hours and started driving home from North Myrtle Beach to Tabor City, which is about 25, 30 minutes. He lived in a trailer on his family's farm, where in the area that his family had lived since the 1800s. Anyway, he starts driving home, and people, your folks in Ory County know this intersection very well, but the intersection of number 9 and Highway number 9 and 57 coming out of North Myrtle Beach is one of the busiest intersections in the state and the most crash prone in Ory County. I drove through it yesterday. I want to say it's 8 lanes going north and then bisected by another 6 lanes with multiple turning lanes and all sorts of ingress and egress for...
Oh, it's a cluster.
Oh, it's a mess.
An
And
absolute
gas
cluster.
stations and Tractor Supplies back there. It's a mess. And I got turned around in there yesterday, I'm embarrassed to say. But somewhere around there, Scott Spivey's driving a black Silverado north, and he encounters a guy named Weldon Boyd in a white Dodge Ram TRX coming off of number 57. They get in a beef. We don't know what happened. It's not clear what happened. We don't have CC footage yet there. But around 5:40 or so, 5:38, 5:40, they encounter one another. And what Weldon Boyd says is that all of a sudden he's just coming out from buying fans at the Tractor Supply to take to his farm to put in the barn, and this guy's up beside him waving a pistol out the window next to his passenger side.
Spivey, allegedly.
Yeah, Scott Spivey's waving a gun out his window at his passenger, who's Bradley Williams, his best friend. So that's what we know. And then we have some limited security camera footage as they they have whatever initial beef. Scott's in front of Weldon at one point, but very quickly, Weldon's in front of Scott at one point, but Scott gets in front of him and really, to our knowledge, never gets back behind Weldon. And Scott brake checks Weldon. That's established. Multiple people saw that. He brake checks him, like, get off my bumper. And then he brake checks him again as they keep traveling north several miles. And they've been going several miles at pretty high speed through the suburbs of North Ory County. And that second time he brake checks him, it sends Weldon Boyd into the median.
Oh.
And he's mad. And we find out later just how mad. So he starts following Scott for 9 miles.
And he's in a super powered
He's
truck,
in a
right?
super powered truck.
Dodge.
It's a Dodge Ram TRX Hellcat. It was the most powerful truck you could buy as a consumer, a V8 engine. And you can hear that engine just purring as he hits the gas. They're going better than 80 miles an hour on the straightaways, 90 miles an hour at times. Wow. It's a truck so powerful. My understanding is they discontinued it because the emissions are out of regulation, which is kind of incredible in this country. But at any rate, he chases him for 9 miles. And there's a witness named Blaze Ward who sees Scott's truck to start with, and she starts following them. She's hauling ass too. She says it. She's following them. She calls 911, and she sounds terrified on her 911 call. There's a man out here. He's driving like crazy. I'm at the Little Caesars. I'm coming up in the food line. She's telling where she is and what she sees.
He's got the gun out of the window?
She says he's got a gun out of the window waving it. So she sounds terrified. There's another couple, Monica and Terry Wright, who live in Loris, and they're coming back from supper in their Suburban or their SUV. They see this beefing. They get stuck at a stoplight about 5 miles into the chase and don't see the whole thing, but they see some of it. And Monica, the wife, thinks she saw a gun. She did not see a gun, and the husband thinks maybe he did. He's not clear. So.
Well, there's pictures of the gun, right?
Well, that is as you get a little bit further up the road, keep driving. I drove this multiple times again yesterday. You keep driving and you're going pretty fast as you get once you get out of the stop and go traffic of North Myrtle Beach, you hit some straightaways. And they're hauling. And you can see there's a picture that Weldon Boyd's passenger took, Bradley Williams, out the driver's side door. Scott Spivey has the gun out the window. It's a .45. And he's got the gun out the window, his hands up. He's right-handed, but it's in his left hand.
Saying
like
back
this.
off, basically.
Yes. What's interesting about that picture is if you look at it, Scott is in his lane. He's in the fast lane, the left lane. But Weldon Boyd, from the angle, has got to be in the turning lane, like straddling a lane to get that picture. They went to some effort to get that picture. And the metadata you can also see how fast they were going, which was fast. Anyway, you keep going. And then Scott Spivey turns on his road home, which is this country crossroads named Camp Swamp Road. It was one of those roads you just wouldn't. I mean, it was like in the Alec Murdoch case when Alec said he got injured in a drive-by shooting. If you sit on that road where he was Old Sakahatchee Road where he was shot. I sat there for 30 minutes one day. No cars came by. This is a road you wouldn't turn on unless you were taking the shortcut to get to Tabor City.
This is about 2 miles south of the border.
It's 2 miles south, a little bit, right around 2 miles south of the North Carolina border. He turns on Camp Swamp Road. And that's when the fourth and fifth, there are 5 witnesses, 6 kind of, but 5 witnesses. And that's when witnesses 4 and 5 see some part of the shooting. They're the only ones that witness any part of the shooting. And that's Lindsay and Frank McMurrough. And they're coming down Camp Swamp the other way, headed towards number 9. And they were headed to the Avista Resort in North Murder Beach to meet some friends. They had just called their friends and said, we're 12 minutes away. Go ahead and order some drinks. We'll meet you at the bar by the pool. And so their mind's not in what, and Frank McMurrough, though, is a guy who grew up with guns. He knows from guns. And he sees a guy in a black truck jump out of this truck. Doors open. He's got his gun in his hand, and the slide is back. And Frank sees the gun as a person who grew up around guns, is trained on guns, says to his wife, "Gun, get down," and pushes her head in her lap. And he hits the gas to speed by whatever's happening. So he sees Scott get out of the truck with the gun and says, "Do not follow me anymore." And then
He heard him say that.
He heard him say that. He heard him say, "Do not follow me anymore." And he says, "The slide is back." He says that in every statement, all 4 statements he's given, meaning it was almost ready to fire, but the bullet wasn't in the chamber. And McMurrough says he keeps driving towards Weldon Boyd, and Weldon Boyd and Bradley Williams, and they had both said earlier, and they were on the phone with 911. They had both said they were both armed, and he describes them having their guns up on the dash of that powerful truck, ready to go. And then all of a sudden he says, it looked like the driver of the white truck unloaded an entire magazine on Spivey. And when he looks, the only thing he sees of the shooting, he looks in his rearview mirror and he sees Spivey kind of twist like he's been hit. He describes it as like being hit with paintballs. Yeah. And then he beats feet around the corner to get away. So what we have is a shooting in broad daylight on a country road with 2 living witnesses, 1 dead witness, and 1 partial witness. Mm-hmm. And what happens is the police immediately say, "Oh, you were in fear for your life. Oh, gosh, yes, you were standing your ground. Standing your ground." They didn't take Weldon Boyd's phone, Bradley Williams' phone. They didn't. Their lawyer came and met with them. They sat in. They gave a voluntary statement with their lawyer present and one another present. And then they went home that night, right? I mean, so there was very little criminal investigation. And
But you uncovered in your investigation tons of incriminating evidence against Weldon Boyd related to text messages, things he preserved.
What happened was the family of Scott Spivey. Scott doesn't have a criminal record. He was drinking that day for sure. We don't know what his blood alcohol level was because someone, and in the 330 pages of the police report, no one signs a document that says, "I agree that Scott Spivey's body should be towed in his truck." In 80-degree heat, his body was taped inside the truck and towed away minutes after all of the officers on the scene simultaneously turned their body cams off for 90 minutes. 90 minutes.
And there's evidence apparently that some of these responding officers were specifically dispatched because of relationships with Boyd.
What happened was that Ory County did a very, in my view, incomplete, uncurious, almost certainly corrupt investigation. And 2 people have been forced out as a result, and 3 disciplined, and I expect more to come.
And there's an ongoing criminal investigation.
3 internal affairs officers down there investigating inside the police, multiple SLED agents investigating the corruption within the police department before they even take another look at the underlying homicide.
Want to thank Valerie once again for taking the time, and be sure to watch that full interview when it drops early next week.
So I'm joined for this segment by our research director, Jen Wood, and we are covering a story that is connected to the saga of Micah Miller, the beautiful aspiring missionary worship leader from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Her still suspicious death from last spring, riveting audiences across the country as they try to find out what led her to take her own life, according to law enforcement, in late April of 2024. Now, Micah Miller is, of course, the late wife of John Paul Miller, the embattled pastor who seems to become the latest prominent religious figure to fall from grace as he is the subject of an ongoing federal investigation and all manner of scrutiny and suspicion, not only regarding his late wife's death, but what we're about to talk about now. Jen Wood, you have been leading our coverage with Callie Lyons on the story of Chris Skinner, a paraplegic whose death back in 2021 Labor Day weekend, his chair, he was again paraplegic who was in a specialized chair that was either deliberately or maliciously rolled into a neighborhood pool in Myrtle Beach, resulting in his death by drowning. But this Chris Skinner story, Jen, we have been following it. It's an investigation that seemed to have been closed, but recently we reported it had been reopened. And this week, Jen, you got some serious updates on this story. Tell us what you found out, Jen.
Definitely. So first of all, Chris was a quadriplegic. So just make sure that we get that straight. And we had, we've had reports that this investigation is reopened. So we did, Kelly Lyons did a FOIA to the Myrtle Beach Police Department because Myrtle Beach has indicated they closed the investigation while the coroner's office has said that it is still open. So we did a massive FOIA to the Myrtle Beach Police Department for investigative files, and they delivered. One of those times where you get results back from a FOIA, and provided us with the results of their full investigation. So whether or not this means that the investigation is still open or if it's closed, I'm not sure. All indications from the coroner's office is that from their end, the investigation is still open. Included in this massive FOIA that we got back were interviews with individuals relating to the cause and manner of Chris Skinner's death, including an interview with his wife, Susie.
Oh boy. And Jen, I want to just for some context here, Susie Skinner is obviously the woman who in the immediate aftermath of Micah Miller's suspicious suicide a year ago was identified by many individuals as the paramour or girlfriend, whatever you want to call her, of Pastor John Paul Miller. Now, since then, she has testified under oath in a municipal court that yes, she is John Paul Miller's girlfriend. Now, the status of their relationship back in 2021, we don't know. There were obviously a ton of rumors, but Jen, Susie Skinner, as we have previously reported, in the immediate aftermath of her husband's death, when he went into that pool under mysterious circumstances, she told police he has a do not resuscitate order. Is that correct?
Correct. And then, while at the scene, left the scene to go get it. And as far as we know, she never located that DNR to provide to first responders.
Set this clip up for us, Jen. What are we about to listen to?
So a lot of the questions surrounding Chris Skinner's death relate to if it was an accident, which, from all indications was heavily indicated at the scene by Susie that it was an accident, if it was a suicide, or if there was
Foul play.
other foul play, right? So, that is what the coroner's office is investigating, whether or not that needs to be changed on the death certificate. So this first interview is with somebody who was close to individuals at the church, and she is giving a firsthand account as to what she was told by somebody very close to the situation regarding Chris's death.
Let's take a listen.
One time when my mother was here, I live in Beaufort, South Carolina. Mm-hmm. And my mom would come visit like once a month usually. But one time when she was here, she told me that he left a note, and she told me that he was having a lot of health problems and just not doing well. and that they were keeping the suicide hush hush because of his 2 kids.
So, Jen, you're telling me we've got a witness that told investigators there was a suicide note?
Yeah, and we had heard rumors of that before. This is the first time I've heard, an actual witness state that they were aware there was a suicide note, and also that they were aware it was a suicide, but they were keeping it hush hush because of the kids. Now, the kids is one theory I've heard. The other theory is they were pushing the accident theory because of a potential life insurance payout on Chris Skinner.
Wow.
So,
wow. Now, this isn't the only recording we obtained. Jen, there is a recording when detectives interviewed Chris Skinner's wife, Susie Skinner, and this clip is just, I don't even know where to start with it. It starts with Susie Skinner, very calm, very dispassionate. She becomes a little, I don't know, defensive maybe is the right word. And then at the end of it, just downright hysterical. Certainly, we don't know exactly what happened here, so we don't want to be overly judgmental in assessing this, but Jen, set this clip up for us.
yeah, so Susie is telling investigators about the day that Chris died. It was a normal day. He had forgotten to take his medication the night before and took it in the morning. And, her theory was that the medication made him tired and he fell asleep and the chair went into the water. But when she starts getting into whether or not it was a suicide, that is when things escalated. And, I have to say, this isn't throughout this entire interview. This is Susie's demeanor. She goes from calm to what you hear in this clip and then back up. It is wild.
Let's take a listen to this.
The detective said, what happened? Okay, well, he was tired. He was up all night long. He finally gets the medications, which is the same medications at night as in the morning. So he finally gets those medications that he had missed, and he probably fell asleep. He went to the same spot in the pool every single day if there was a person that could let him into the pool area. If not, he went on the outside of the gate, and he would sit there, and he would play on his phone, or he would rest. That's what he did every morning after he walked the dog. That morning, obviously, a neighbor let him into the pool. And so, Yes, I think he fell asleep or whatever. I don't know. I haven't seen the video. And that morning when that detective's asking me those questions or whatever, I haven't seen the video. I have no idea. So yes, that's my best guess on that day at that moment that's what happened to my husband. I'm the one that lives with him. I'm the one that takes care of him. I'm the one that was there the night before. I'm the one that got him up that morning. I'm the one that gives him the medication. Not these other people. I'm the one that lives with him. Yes, I know he's sad. He's freaking paralyzed for 21 years. Would you not be sad? But does that guarantee 100% that he killed himself? I have no idea. I am not a detective, and I was not in his mind that morning. That is what I told that detective, and that is exactly what I stand by today. Okay. I have no idea.
Yeah, sure.
You decide.
Wow, Jen. This whole story, I don't even know where to go with it. It started, again, last May with Micah's suspicious suicide. Now we've got this story. And I do want to point out, we have heard from sources close to this investigation that there are, in fact, federal assets being used to assist the local coroner's office as they attempt to make sense of exactly what transpired here, whether it was an unfortunate tragic accident, whether it was a deliberate suicide, or, as some have suggested, something perhaps more malicious. Obviously, you and Callie have done amazing work on this story, so please, Jen, keep us posted if there are any more big developments like this in the Chris Skinner case. And Jen, I understand we're going to be dropping all of these audio files and other information obtained through our Freedom of Information request next week. So, Jen, thank you. Great work on this story.
Thank you, Will.
So for decades, the state of South Carolina has wielded outsized influence on the national political stage. It goes all the way back to former Vice President John C. Calhoun, has continued in more recent years with the likes of Strom Thurmond and more recently, U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham. Also, the Palmetto State plays a starring role when it comes to picking presidents, whether you're on the Republican side with our first in the South presidential primary or on the Democratic side where South Carolina goes first in the nation.
last two presidents of the United States owe their presidencies to South Carolina. So we always tell our true crime folks and people who come to FITSNews for other content, pay attention to the political stuff because, hey, we're going to pick your leaders for you. But I'm joined by Dylan Nolan to talk about the latest star in the Palmetto political sky who's making waves at the national level, U.S. Congresswoman Nancy Mace. Now, Mace has been making news for months, being very aggressive on anti-trans issues. And in particular, February of this year, she went on the floor of the U.S. Congress and delivered a speech. She's calling it the Scorched Earth speech, calling out multiple men, including her former fiance, Patrick Bryant, for all manner of criminal sexual acts, including sex trafficking, rape, serious charges that Mace leveled on the floor of the U.S. House in that February speech. But things have gone a bit off the rails in the months since that speech. First of all, she's been sued by one of those men. A very credible lawsuit filed by attorneys Eric Bland. We know Eric from the Murdoch saga. And his partner, Ronnie Richter, filed a lawsuit on behalf of one of the individuals she named, Brian Musgrave, a gentleman from Fort Mill, South Carolina. One of the people she named has been arrested, although it was not related to the charges that Mace laid out in her speech. Her ex-fiance, they've been going back and forth with statements in the media. And then the other gentleman involved in this situation lost his job as a founding partner with a big investment firm down in Charleston. So there's been all sorts of fallout. And Mace has sued people too related to this as well. So just a flurry of activity, kind of a mixed bag politically. But Dylan, this week we saw a development that could shake this thing up in a very big way. And I'm talking about the deposition of Wes Donahue, Mace's former strategist, a veteran national political and corporate comms guy. Just an incredibly smart guy. We both know Wes.
We've had him in our studio.
He's been here before. We're going to get him back in after this, let me tell you. But Dylan, this deposition, which was obtained exclusively by FITSNews earlier this week, we published it. We published an article on it detailing a lot of these claims that were made. One of the rawest documents, one of the most just bare laid out there.
2-hour deposition taken over Zoom.
Yeah. I mean, you read this thing. I read this thing. Hundreds, if not thousands of people have read this thing now. It's being picked up just as we filmed this by mainstream media starting to seize on this document. It's a bombshell, wasn't it?
It is. I mean, in this document, Wes accuses Nancy Mace of attempting to have him act as an intermediary to effectively blackmail her ex-fiance, threatening that she would go public with images that she says that he took of women naked without their knowledge or consent if she did not get complete ownership of the two houses which they jointly owned at the time.
Yeah, there's one in Daniel Island, I believe one in Washington, D.C., and according to Donahue, that's the whole motivation for what Mace...
A property play.
Right. But there were a lot of other layers to this thing, too, Dylan. Some of the things that Donahue said about Mace in this deposition, calling her a serial liar, basically saying he trusts nothing that comes out of her mouth.
Saying that she's obsessed with her sex life and that she speaks about it inappropriately in professional settings all the time.
Right. And of course, she made some headlines a few years back when she showed up at a prayer breakfast in Washington, D.C. and indicated that she was going to be late because her husband was trying to get a little morning.
Yeah, that might not be the audience for that joke.
Right. Tim
But I mean, he
Scott.
also said that she fabricates a lot of other stuff, referring back to the incident where she allegedly had her property graffitied, which, incidentally looked a lot like her own handwriting. But, those close to her definitely have eyebrows raised about incidents like that.
Well, he said on the record in this deposition under oath, what, let's be honest, a lot of people have been thinking. He said on numerous occasions in the deposition that he felt Nancy Mace was unstable, that she was going through an episode, that something over the last few months has broken in her psyche, according to Wes. And again, he fired her very publicly, or let's phrase that differently. He declined to work with her further.
Wes calls, not renewing contracts with people firing his clients, which I think is very funny.
Right. But this happened back in December of last year, and he's just been pillaring Mace on social media ever since. But this document really laid it out there. And let me ask you this, Dylan. You've been watching Nancy Mace for a while, several years now. You've been observing her politically in Washington on the campaign trail as a potential gubernatorial frontrunner here in South Carolina. Do you think there's credence to his statements about her mental health?
I mean, the side that one sees of somebody like that in public is, I don't work with her, so I don't get to see the Nancy Mace behind the veil. Um, the one thing that I do think that anyone can observe that Wes actually talks about in the deposition is the fact that she has lost weight pretty significantly recently. But who knows what the cause is? I mean, Donald Trump's lost a lot of weight, and both of them seem to have started losing weight when Ozempic hit the market. I don't know. Are both of them really, stressed out, have a lot of job obligations, and just aren't eating as much? Are they on the big O, or the fat shot, as Trump likes to call it? Or are there other factors in their life? I don't know. That's something that I can observe. Certainly, uh, it must be interesting working in her comms shop with the amount of stuff that's going on her Twitter, like we haven't even talked about. This week, she was talking about putting her nude pictures up in a congressional hearing. This had Twitter and all of social media completely rolling for like 6 hours because everybody thought that they were going to see, 4K pictures of Nancy Mace's boobs.
They did not.
No, they got some blurry ones on like a cardboard cutout, which they were very disappointed about. But typically, if you're representing a congressional district, all of social media is not speculating about whether they're going to see your bare breast for 6 hours.
Yeah, that was quite the story this week. And a lot of, certainly the male constituents, I guess, in South Carolina, how do we want to say this? I don't know anymore these days, Dylan. You young folks and all these different interests sexually, but, a lot of folks were disappointed. They were let down by the big Mace reveal.
Right. And, say what you will of the pictures which were revealed of Nancy Mace's breasts. If we're having this conversation, how are voters in the upstate going to take this when we think about this from a statewide perspective? I mean, that's a very socially conservative area. As we look towards the 2026 governor's race, I'm not sure that this is a conversation that if I'm Mace's strategist, I want us to be having right now.
But let's look also at the parts of this deposition that cut the other way, because there were some lines in there. And again, Donahue, clearly a hostile witness toward Nancy Mace. Clearly, he's somebody who does not like her, thinks very poorly of her as a politician and a person. But there were some things he said that could work in her favor. For example, he said he believed her when she said that she was frightened regarding her former fiance, Patrick Bryant, a very successful Charleston entrepreneur, obviously, and we published his responses to Nancy's allegations in their entirety. But Donahue also remarked about seeing bruises on Mace's arm at one point, which she attributed, I guess, to alleged abuse.
And Mr. Bryant's lawyer did not ask any follow-up questions about that. However, I'd assume that Wes will be dragged into another deposition at some point related to this where follow-up questions will be asked about that, and I'll be very interested to hear what his responses are.
Now, he said in this document, though, that he believes her when she says she feels fearful. He said in this document that she repeatedly conveyed to him, "Don't tell my fiance where I live." And then he said in the document at one point, the former fiance now, asked him where she was living, and he declined to tell her. So there's some parts in there that certainly if you're Nancy Mace and her comm shop, you can sort of pick those out. But I think on the whole, this was a damaging document for Nancy Mace. Dylan, do you agree?
Yeah, and I do appreciate Wes's tact that he took. Obviously he was not a friendly witness to Congresswoman Mace, but he certainly did not throw away, or completely disregard the claims that she's made. He just said, I haven't seen evidence of this myself. Here's what I have seen. But he didn't say, I think she's a raving lunatic and that none of these claims should be taken seriously. In fact, it was the opposite of that. He felt that she was genuinely distressed and that she believed what she was saying. Now, he could only speak to what he had seen himself, and I think further litigation, more depositions like this, we will probably get a clearer and clearer picture of whatever the truth was in this situation which Nancy has made these allegations about. But he certainly did not completely disregard what she had to say.
Right. Now let's put cards on the table here for everybody who's watching this, who's unfamiliar with FITSNews and its history. Nancy Mace used to be a part owner of this media outlet for about 5 years, back in the late aughts and early teens, prior to her first run for higher office against U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham back in 2014. She basically ran the marketing, ran the PR for this. I did a hell of a job. I mean, she's a great political thinker, strategist, communicator. Obviously, she knows how to get headlines and get attention and get her name in the news, sometimes good, sometimes bad. But Dylan, this is a politician who had reached a point of real credibility. The Wall Street Journal, in fact, was looking at her as a potential vice presidential shortlist name at one point. But in the last few months, we've seen a dramatic shift in Nancy Mace. And according to Donahue in this deposition, he believes it's related to the breakup with Patrick Bryant, who, by the way, he said in the deposition, Bryant was still in love with Mace, which I thought was kind of interesting based on how they're going back and forth.
They both
at
seem
each
very
other.
torn up about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like a reality show being played out at the highest levels of power. And we also need to point out that this is not just transpiring in the D.C. fishbowl. This is unfolding, or some would say imploding, in the context of South Carolina's next governor's race, in which Mace is one of the 3 to 4 frontrunners.
Certainly. Yeah, I mean, I would argue that her and Alan Wilson are the head and shoulders favorites right now.
And that brings us to an interesting discussion that we reported on exclusively this week on the floor of the U.S. House. FITSNews had some sources who were watching Mace and U.S. Congressman Ralph Norman, who earlier this week we exclusively reported on his intention to jump into the South Carolina governor's race. And they were getting ready to cast a key procedural vote on Donald Trump's signature big, beautiful bill, they call it, this legislation that contains the extension of the tax cuts, Trump's debt ceiling demand, a lot of stuff in that bill. Both Mace and Norman voted in favor of that bill. But apparently during the run-up to that vote, there was an exchange on the floor of the U.S. House, and Mace apparently approached Norman and said, "Are you going to run?" He responded in the affirmative, consistent with what we reported. She said something along the lines of, "You know, I've got the club," referring to the Club for Growth, a very influential advocacy group up there in Washington. She also told him, "You know, it's going to take $8 million, I believe was the number she threw out. Norman responded in the affirmative, and then she said, "May the best woman win." That was the gist of the conversation that we got. That's an old Nikki Haley line, if you remember. But so, Dylan, she's entering this race, claiming to have all this big support, all this financial backing. Ralph Norman coming in now with the potential to drop God knows how much money in the race. This is going to be an expensive governor's race.
Certainly, and I'll be very interested to see the communications lines that Nancy takes against Ralph. Obviously, she has gone hard in the paint against Alan Wilson. This sounds like this could be the opening of hostilities here. I guess we'll have to keep tuned to her ex to see if she starts bombarding him as well.
Yeah, ex, obviously her social, not the ex-fiance. But yeah, our sources indicated this was a friendly conversation with Norman that they overheard on the floor of the House. But as we noted in our coverage, Dylan.
Now, this is the blood sport, my friend.
Yeah.
I mean, they could have cordial relations, when they see each other face to face and still be going ham in the press.
Not going to be friendly for long. Well, it's been fascinating to watch, and we broke a ton of news on this throughout the week, Dylan. It was a big political week here in South Carolina with the deposition from West Donahue and Ralph Norman's decision to jump in. And I also got to say, we've done a real good job, I think, here at FITSNews of covering this governor's race and all the different angles. And there was a big angle that I think folks are missing as we look at this vote we were just talking about on Trump's beautiful bill. And I want to point this out to our audience. If you haven't followed this, FITSNews reported a few weeks ago that Donald Trump was not planning at this moment to make any endorsement in the South Carolina governor's race. And a lot of folks were reaching out, "Oh, where are you getting that? That's not true. That's, yeah, he's going to endorse this one or that one or this one." But you notice, Dylan, all three of those South Carolina members of Congress who have ties to the governor's race, we're talking about Nancy Mace, Ralph Norman, and Alan Wilson's father, Joe Wilson, all three of them voted for Trump's bill. So I think Trump knows what's up. And that bill passed by how many votes, Dylan?
Narrow margin, one vote.
One vote. Any one of those South Carolina lawmakers could have sunk that bill, but they all voted for it. And I think that is one reason that Trump knows he cannot get into this race, particularly if he's coming in against any of those members of Congress or their relatives.
Yeah. By the way, can we just take a little turn here as a fiscally conservative website when it comes to the opinion section? My goodness, what a disappointment this has been.
Well, are you surprised?
No, not a surprise, but a disappointment.
Yeah, I mean, Democrats, Republicans, Tea Party, MAGA. I mean,
for folks who don't know, this is a $3 trillion deficit increasing bill over its lifespan, and if its provisions are renewed, it looks like it's a $6 trillion bill. So it's certainly not anything that a fiscal conservative would be happy with.
That's right. Only 2 Republicans voted against it, though. One of them, Thomas Massey. I tell you what, we got to get Thomas Massey in here at some point.
Well,
man.
yeah, after Trump primaries him, I guess we can come in here. Although I think his constituents will probably send him back.
Yeah, let's get him in here. I tell you, he and Rand Paul, those Kentucky guys.
There's something different over there, something in the water. Perhaps it's
that
bourbon.
bluegrass and bourbon, man. Those guys have been solid on fiscal issues. I got to say, as a fiscal conservative, that I appreciate that. But South Carolina, though, where it's at, Dylan, when it comes to the next presidential fight, an open race. You got any thoughts on who's in the pole position right now in the Palmetto State as we start looking toward 2028?
I mean, I think whoever is the MAGA heir stands strong. This state has proven to be a MAGA state in the era of Donald Trump. And I think that if he turns over the keys to somebody like J.D. Vance at a time where the world is not completely on fire and the economy is not completely on fire, that person stands a really strong chance.
Any that you see that you personally gravitate toward?
At this juncture, I'd rather not comment on that.
Playing your cards close to the vest, Dylan. I like it, man. I like it. But hey, we got to rewind a little bit because we're going down this national road. But I forgot to mention there's another potential South Carolina gubernatorial candidate that we haven't talked about that made some huge news this past week. And again, I don't know what his intentions are. We talked about Ralph Norman and all the money he might throw into a possible run for governor. There's another successful businessman that may have that ability and possibly could think about running for governor if none of these other candidates pan out. I'm talking about Rom Reddy, South Carolina low country businessman, very successful guy. He's been in a huge battle with South Carolina's administrative bureaucrat state. And we went to the administrative law court this week to watch that battle unfold as Reddy, representing himself, one guy, standing against an army of government lawyers. Just a huge battle over private property rights in South Carolina. Heck, let's just cut to this clip. Andy Fancher and I went there this week. Here's Andy's package from that hearing.
We really going to do this property by property, day by day, storm by storm?
I'm Will Folks with FITSNews. I'm standing outside South Carolina's Administrative Law Court, where earlier today, Low Country South Carolina businessman Rom Reddy, founder of the Doge SC movement, delivered an aggressive rebuke of South Carolina's bureaucrat regulatory state and an impassioned appeal for the rights of property owners across South Carolina.
The burden is to show that we have the right.
At the heart of Reddy's argument is the notion that unelected state bureaucrats lack the authority to seize private property along the coast in the aftermath of storms based on arbitrary measurements and lacking statutory authority.
And if we went into this unlimited jurisdiction of beach critical areas that would unleash a storm all through the state, well, even then, that's where we are.
Now, some have framed this as a rich man trying to protect his property by building a wall, but Reddy has successfully framed the case as an assault on private property rights for all South Carolinians. His argument, if they can come for me, what's to stop them from coming for your property?
I don't know how you get here. Like I said, you can't get past the statute.
Now, in the aftermath of Reddy's impassioned closing argument and a rather lackluster response from the state, each side will have 30 days to submit draft orders to Judge Anderson. At that point, he'll review both of them and eventually submit a ruling. Now, make no mistake, Reddy has made it abundantly clear he will appeal any decision which deprives him of property rights and sets a precedent for unlimited, unrestricted regulatory takings here in the state of South Carolina.
And I don't know what happens in a court like this. The judge was very good to me. He was very kind, but the word is that the admin judges with no jury typically rule with the admin state. But the fight is not over. This is a fight I did not start, but it is a fight I will finish.
For the very latest on this case and updates on Rom Reddy's efforts with Doge SC, keep it tuned to FITSNews.com.
All right, Dylan, we're not even in 2026 yet. We're talking. All this is related.
Nobody has filed.
There's no filing. There's no official candidates yet. Like literally this week, we reported that the first person is likely to announce. There's no race yet. How is things this crazy?
That's Palmetto politics for you. Never a dull moment.
Well, it's only going to get crazier moving forward. So obviously, if you've learned anything on this segment, you got to keep it tuned to FITSNews because we're the tip of the spear on all of these stories, just as we have been on Murdoch. So many big stories based here in the Palmetto State. You want to know first? Come to FITSNews. Dylan, thanks for joining me on this segment.
It's always fun.
All right, folks, that is a wrap for this week's edition of Your Week in Review. I told you it was jam-packed, and guess what? This wasn't even all the news that we covered this week. Up in Spartanburg County, South Carolina, our Andy Fancher reporting exclusively that Spartanburg County Sheriff Chuck Wright, who has been at the focus of a federal inquiry, has cleared out his office and may have even turned in his badge and gun. What is going on with one of the Palmetto State's longest-serving, most powerful law enforcement leaders? We will let you know as soon as we get details, but keep it tuned to FITSNews for the latest on that story and all of these stories that we covered in the show. Once again, your support drives everything that we do here at FITSNews. These lights, these cameras, the action that we bring to you every week, your support enables and empowers all of it. So if you haven't already, please consider supporting our work and subscribing to FITSNews. We'll catch you next time on Your Week in Review.